introduce Sheridan, who I've known for quite a while since she's come to Wilson, since we share a lot of interests. First, I'd like to welcome to the college Marty and Dave in the back, who are Sheridan's folks.
Thank you.
And what I learned in preparing for this is that, first I thought Sheridan's project was kind of way out there, going to India to study cows in India. So this is just like part of a natural progression. She worked as a wildlife rehabilitator for 2 years as her volunteer work through service at the college. She worked in Leicester at a farm sanctuary for farm animals. Even her major is biology, but also a minor in sociology, because she's really interested in the relationship between humans and animals. And after graduating, she plans on going to a farm sanctuary in Ireland to do some work there. So this project in India is really just a blip along the way, and kind of a long history of interest in humans and animals and animal welfare and how we can help animals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sheridan.
Thanks, Bob. Was Allogrooming and Agonism, Understanding the Social Behavior in Indian Cattle and Water Buffalo. On January 18, 2014, I arrived in Puttaparthi, Andhra Pradesh to begin working with the Karuna Society for Animals and Nature. Since forming in 2000, Karuna has provided free medical care and birth control to countless village dogs and cats while also maintaining a wildlife rehabilitation center. While with Karuna, I assisted veterinarians daily and even helped rehabilitate and release a young monkey, a bear cub, a jaguar, and 2 fawns. Yet despite all of that, the time I valued most was the time I spent working in Karuna's cattle sanctuary. After telling you all of that, you might be wondering, why cows? From a Western lens, the idea of a cow sanctuary might seem a bit odd, but for India, the cow holds immense importance. Since its origins, Hinduism has long inspired an awe of cows and its followers, and for very good reasons. Cows not only provide milk and ghee, both of which are staples to the Indian diet, but also labor, medicinal urine, and manure that one can use to build and even heat their homes. However, with the effects of globalism and an increasing pressure to model the West, the status of the Indian cow is now more vulnerable than ever before. The country's many roaming cows are known to ingest various plastics, which often smell of the food they once contained. This plastic binds together, completely disrupting their ruminant system and eventually results in death. Karuna is one out of only a few organizations that have performed successful ruminotomies, once removing 70 kilograms of plastic from 1 cow. This plastic consumption and the ever-increasing effects of illegal transportation and illegal slaughter has caused immense pressure on the few cow sanctuaries in existence. As a result, Karuna had a large herd of cattle and water buffalo upon my arrival. My first month of volunteering in the cattle ward was spent picking up cow shit. This was one of the few English words my human companions knew, and I thought it was really funny when I first found out about it. I used this time to gain familiarity with the herd, eventually coming to identify each individual by either a name or a number that I assigned them, and then entering that all into an Excel sheet with a photograph of every individual. In total, there were 71 cattle and 35 water buffalo, with a few donkeys and 1 camel scattered about, but not included in the study. It varied in age, sex, breed, species, state of health, and number of limbs. And this is why studying this herd presented such a unique opportunity. Compared to those on farms or other animal production-based businesses, Karuna's herd is very unique because it varies so greatly. Furthermore, the cows and buffaloes are not raised for slaughter or dairy production and were free to interact in any way they chose. It may be one out of only a few locations in the world where so many different bovines are allowed to interact in such a way. And this is just an example of herd diversity. On the far right is number 12, who is one of 5 individuals missing a limb. And then you can just see, obviously, differences in size, but there is differences in species and sex and many other things. Certain behaviors of social animals have been found to influence the well-being of individuals. Because each individual of my herd was unconfined and free to interact in any way they chose, I decided it would be both beneficial and interesting to study their social behaviors. Before beginning observation, I defined 5 behaviors that I would document. These behaviors consisted of 1, allogrooming, which is simply licking another individual; 2, headbutting, in which one individual lowers their head and uses it to make forceful contact with the receiving individual; 3, avoidance, in which a approaches another, but that receiving individual either runs away or takes steps away and no contact is made. And headbutting and avoidance constitute agonism within this study. Self-grooming is when one individual uses a part of their body or another object to rub against their own body. So their horns, their legs, their tongue, a wall, a wheelbarrow could all be used to rub against their own body and have it be labeled self-grooming. In their 2008 study of social dominance and feeding displacement between tribes, Valiant et al. Described the nature of herd species as an adaptive strategy for survival and success. Like nearly all adaptations, the communal affinity of bovine is accompanied by both benefits and costs. The social behavior of allogrooming has been found to reduce the parasite load of an individual, and it has also been known to indicate the strength of social bonds. Allogrooming is also known to be used by individuals to maintain herd stability. Self-grooming is similar to allogrooming, and that is known to function and be used by wild bovids to maintain low parasite loads. Agonism, on the other hand, is a form of social dominance, and is thought to primarily function to use ritualization as a means to decrease levels of aggression within the herd. So basically, agonism keeps everyone in line, makes them know their rank, makes them know that there is an order and that chaos isn't breaking out in the herd. The importance of these three behaviors led me to ask this question. Do amounts of these behaviors significantly differ between species, sex, and age group? In an attempt to answer this question, an observational study from February 21st to March 19, 2014 was conducted. The cattle ward was divided into 3 unrestricted zones. A session was defined as one 10-minute period of behavior sampling with continuous reporting methods in one zone. And behavior sampling was me standing in one zone, only looking at the cows in that one zone, and any time a behavior of interest occurred, so that's allogrooming, self-grooming, or agonism, I would document it. A systematic session rotation was designed with the observer rotating from one zone to the next consecutive zone. So if I begun the day in zone 1, after a 10-minute period of behavior sampling, I would rotate to zone 2, and after 10 minutes to zone 3, and then after 10 minutes back to zone 1. And on average, 5 sessions occurred between 8 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. each day. During a session, all behaviors of interest seemed to be performed or received by an individual were documented. The ID of both the acting and receiving individual was spoken into a recorder, as well as the specific behavior of interest occurring, the zone, and the number of any accompanying photograph to help identify. Each day's verbal recordings were then entered into an Excel sheet. After the observational component of the study was finished, the total number of each behavior performed and received by the individual was calculated. In order to standardize the data, each behavior total of an individual was then divided by the number of sessions they were known to be present in over the entirety of the study. So this is all for just one example individual. So I had 5 behaviors, 3 behaviors, but each had, or 2 of them had 2 different states being performed or received. And they had those 5 values, and then I divided each of those 5 values by the number of sessions that individual was known to be present in. And this was done for producing 5 values for 106 individuals. In total, 652 interactions were reported from 97 sessions. Non-parametric tests are often preferred for behavioral research due to the nature of rare behavior documentation and the availability of sample sizes. Thus, a Crystal-Wallace test, followed with a Mann-Whitney pairwise comparison, was used to examine the relationship between the behaviors of interest in age group, sex, and species. And just for the sake of time, I'll talk about the results with sex, and then I'll note on them in my discussion. But both sexes did not significantly differ from one another in any of the behaviors of interest. So whether it was performed or received allogrooming, performed or received agonism, or performed self-grooming, there was no significant difference between the 2 sexes. Here's a bar graph of the medians of performed and received allogrooming. A p-value of 0.097 for received allogrooming and a p-value of 0.969 for performed allogrooming reveals that displays of allogrooming are not significantly different across the 3 age groups. Thus, the null hypothesis, which states that age group does not influence allogrooming, cannot be rejected. So it's most obvious on the right with performed allogrooming that there is no significant difference. It's a little hard to tell here because we see with nursing calves that the median per session is a little bit higher, but according to the test, it is not significantly higher. The medians of species are significantly different from one another in regards to both received and performed allogrooming. A p-value of 0.000 exists for received allogrooming, while a p-value of 0.002 exists for performed allogrooming. Not only were the medians significantly different from one another, but cattle displayed higher amounts for both states of behavior. As you can see in the graph here, the cattle significantly received and performed more allogrooming than their buffalo companions. The buffalo, whose median per session is 0, prevents them from being seen on this graph, but if they had any other median per session, you would see an orange bar here. So received and performed is significantly higher for cattle. In summary of allogrooming, there is no significant difference in the amount performed or received by the 3 age groups. However, a significant relationship between allogrooming and species exists in which cattle perform and receive more allogrooming. While the differences in medians of received agonism were not significant, with a p-value of 0.123, a significant relationship between certain age groups and performed agonism were found to exist. Nursing calves and young adults are not significantly different from one another. However, the medians of performed agonism in both of these age groups did significantly differ from that of adults. A significant p-value of 0.000 exists when comparing the medians of adults to that of both young adults and nursing calves. So you can see here that the median displayed per session for both nursing calves and young adults is 0, so they're not appearing. And these letters are showing that while A's are not significantly different from one another, both A's are significantly different from B, and that's pretty obvious because we can see that adults did perform much more agonism, and so there is a significant difference there. There was no significant difference found in agonism displays between the 2 species. Medians of both received and performed agonism varied by only a few decimals in the hundredth place, as you can see in the graph provided. In summary of agonism, no significant difference in the amount performed or received by either species. However, a significant relationship exists to age group in which adults significantly perform more agonism than the 2 other age groups. Medians of self-grooming are also significantly different between the 3 age groups. Nursing calf medians were significantly different from that of young adults with a p-value of 0.013, and from adults with a p-value of 0.000. Furthermore, a significant value of 0.035 exists between self-grooming medians of young adults and adults. Here you can see that they are all significantly different and that self-grooming displays decrease with age. So it's pretty apparent that nursing calves are different than the other 2. It's harder to tell between young adults and adults. And the p-value of 0.035 is not greatly significant, but according to the test, it is still a significant difference in which young adults do significantly perform more self-grooming than adults. The Mann-Whitney U test also found a significant difference between the medians of self-grooming across species. A p-value of 0.007 exists in the amounts of self-grooming, and as you can see here, cattle demonstrated greater amounts of self-grooming than buffalo. In summary of self-grooming, a significant relationship to species exists in which cattle significantly perform more self-grooming than buffalo, and a significant relationship to age group also exists in which self-grooming decreases with age. While further study needs to occur, this decrease in self-grooming with age may be due to the fact that parasites pose a greater threat to the health of a developing individual. A 2006 study of Impala found that in growing calves, a single female tick can cause a decrease in weight gain of up to 10 grams. This amounts to a reduction in weight gain of up to 3.1 kilograms per engorging tick per year. In contrast, a light or moderate parasite load might not noticeably impact the health of a well-fed adult. The same study found that newborn impala tend to self-groom more frequently than the adults of the same species, and the same trend has also been found in domestic goats. Thus, parasites might threaten the survival of young individuals, causing them to self-groom more. We also have seen that cattle significantly self-groom more than buffalo, and I think this can be explained by two reasons. One, their parasite loads might just simply be different, where cows have more parasites than buffalo, and thus more self-grooming occurs. Or it just might be that their skin's ability to deter parasites differs between the 2 species. So, buffalo have noticeably different skin than that of cattle, in that it's darker, a little bit drier, rougher, and their hair is coarser. So this might allow them to defend themselves against parasites more, causing them to self-groom less. With allogrooming, we saw that cattle significantly perform and receive more than buffalo. And allogrooming has similar functions to self-grooming in that they have both been found to be used to remove parasites. And so it could also be described by this difference in parasite load. However, allogrooming is also known to function to maintain herd stability and create social bonds. So it might simply be that buffaloes have a different social dynamics than cattle, and that they require less allogrooming to maintain herd stability and social bonds, or that they use something else entirely. There's also no difference in age groups with allogrooming, and this I found really interesting, considering the fact that I included mother-calf interactions with the data. So in my mind, I was expecting to see higher levels of received allogrooming in calves and higher levels of performed allogrooming in mothers. However, this was not the case. And I think this can be explained by that trend we saw with self-grooming, where higher self-grooming levels in calves may not require more allogrooming from their mothers or others in the herd. So because calves are actively removing their own parasites, that might just allow their mothers to lick them just as much as she would any other individual in the herd. However, I think further research is necessary to understand this lack of significant difference. And with agonism, we see that adults significantly perform more agonism than the other two age groups. And I think this can be explained by just a difference in roles. So while younger individuals are primarily focused on nursing, self-grooming, and just the stresses of development, it might be the role of adults to maintain herd hierarchy, make sure everyone's in their place, and that there's no uncertainty or chaos. And that's what agonism is known to function to do. I think it's important to note that there were a couple instances where younger individuals were head-to-head in something that looked like headbutting, but then they remained side by side or chased each other around. And I did not feel comfortable classifying this as agonism because in my mind it was more of a form of play. And yes, play usually helps younger individuals later in life when they learn how to defend themselves, but in my mind it's not true agonism, and so I didn't classify it as this. This only happened a couple times, and I don't really think it affected the data or the findings here, but it is something to keep in mind. And then there was no difference in sexes. This was really surprising to me because I worked with intact bulls who were often aggressive towards me. I would be out in the field and someone would just yell down, "Madame, fighting bull." They called me Madame, I couldn't get them to stop it. But they would say, "Madame, fighting bull," and I got too close to the aggressive bull. And so this is why this is surprising, because there was no difference in agonism between males and females. And I think that this can be explained by why while the numbers are the same, the reasons for agonism, the triggers for agonism might be different between the two species. So while females might act agonistically towards individuals who get too close to their calves, males might act agonistically just to ensure their territory, ensure their rank, and establish the ranks of those around them. And in conclusion, while working to care for vulnerable individuals and preserving a vital aspect of Indian culture, cattle sanctuaries also create an incredible opportunity for the scientific community. Studying the behavior of cattle and water buffalo, like that of the herd at Karuna, might provide a glimpse into what the social dynamics of wild populations could be if they were to exist. Countless further studies of individuals in sanctuaries could be done to aid the work of these nonprofits and to add to our knowledge of social behavior and their function. Are there any questions? Yeah.
So did you notice anything that might have been influenced by your presence?
That is true. But with these cows, and I can't say that for the ones that were just coming in, but most of them have been with the sanctuary. The sanctuary has been collecting cows for over 20 years. And so I think that they were pretty used to human interaction. They were constantly just being moved around, and there was 4 people who worked in the cattle ward, and so I don't think me standing there really affected it, but it is a possibility.
You said there were multiple species. Is it just the 2?
Just the 2. Okay. Well, and I mean there were donkeys and camels, but I wasn't looking at their social behavior.
And would there have been a way for you to look at agonistic behavior as a function of species like cattle versus cattle, cattle versus buffalo, buffalo?
Yeah, and so that is something I really wanted. I wanted to find out the initiating species and if one was more likely. But if you want me to fit that in there and try to do it, I would probably live in this study if I could. I'd keep doing all the things. But it's just, I had so much that I could look at, and this is what I focused on.
So there are some naturally occurring bovine species that are in the wild at this point. Do you know what the densities are like compared to what the density was in your study population?
No, I don't. So that's a good point, because density might affect levels of, maybe levels of all social behavior, but in my mind it might affect levels of agonism. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm looking at you.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering, just because you're interested in animal welfare and things like that, is the information that you gather could it be used for management of a thing like this, that we're gonna try to keep these ones together and these together, but not those?
It could be depending on the methods of the sanctuary. So my sanctuary had them all together, and at 10:30 every day, they would go out to the forest for like 5 hours. It was not really a forest. You can see in the picture there, it's like more like rocks and things like that. And then they would come back. So it's not applicable to the practices of this sanctuary, but depending on the other sanctuaries. But then again, like if you're seeing adults, because agonism and social defeat has been actually found to affect the weight gain of individuals, and especially younger individuals. So that is something to take into consideration and maybe separate along age groups. If there are no more questions, I would just really deeply like to thank all members of the Karuna Society for Animals and Nature, especially Clementine Paz, one of the most inspiring women I will ever meet, my advisor Bob Eckstein, Jessa Medowski, and Elisa Hovey, and my loved ones, family, friends, and cows.